France has really stepped up and is a very close friend to Ukraine.
In which we can collectively try to help Ukrainians because we have advantage, we have edge, we have knowledge. Ukraine is a vibrant democracy. Whatever the face, whatever the news, the resilience and the bravery of the Ukrainian people.
They are fighting for their country, they're fighting for their culture and identity.
Gaël Veyssière is the ambassador of France to Ukraine. A career diplomat since 1997, he has held senior positions in the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the permanent representation of France to the EU, and the permanent mission to the UN in New York. From 2019 to 2023, he served as France's ambassador to Croatia, following his work as head of office to the Minister for European Affairs.
Hello, I'm Natalka Cmoc. This is Off the Record. I'm the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine. And today I'm here with Ambassador of France, Gaël Veyssière. Welcome here to the podcast. Just to give you a little bit of background, this is a dialogue or a conversation. It's not an interview. And the whole idea of this podcast is to hear, what do ambassadors talk about? What difference do they make? Diplomacy has changed and so on. And we were just talking about before we started that we actually presented our credentials on the same day, along with a couple of other colleagues, and a lot has changed here. But before we get there, perhaps you could say a little bit about yourself, because your bio is quite interesting. You've been ambassador previously. You've been posted to New York. You've been a diplomat for a long, long time.
Thank you. No, thank you, Natalia. Well, I'm a career diplomat, yes. And I was, during the years, I was specializing mainly on EU affairs. Not only, I also worked in the UN for the UN Security Council as representative of France, but I did several postings in the EU galaxy, let's say. And then I was chief of staff of different French deputy ministers for EU affairs, which in our system, this position is under the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And then I was ambassador to Croatia. And there was a kind of narrative there, because back in the days, there was the Croatian presidency of the European Council of Ministers, and then they enter into Schengen and into the Eurozone. So it was, there was kind of logic. And then my authorities asked me if I would be okay to go to Ukraine. And I was very excited and thrilled about that. And actually thinking about it, to some extent, it made sense, because we used to, to have as envoy specialists from Russia. But of course, with the war and this country changing so much, sending somebody who has more background in the EU because of EU accession and enlargement, actually, it was quite effective. So I said yes, of course, with lots of enthusiasm. And yes, we started together since we presented our credentials the same day.
Yes,
2 years ago.
There's been so much that has happened since then. It's very difficult to recount everything, so I'm not even going to try. But I think what I'm hearing compared to other missions, is unlike you, this is my first ambassadorial posting. So I've asked other friends, like, is this, or other colleagues, is this like this everywhere? And it's not. So I think this is known to be quite a charged mission. Do you find that, though? You have something to compare to?
Well, I had something to compare to, but it was a very, of course, different setting. For example, when I was ambassador to Croatia, I think I had twice the visit of a Minister of Foreign Affairs and one the visit of a French president in 3 years.
And
or
now?
4 years, mind you. And now, the current Minister of Foreign Affairs already has come 3 times, and so it would be 5 visits of a French Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2 years, if I count everything. French president came too, so okay, the intensity is far higher, which is, of course, very exciting and, vibrant, and it takes a toll also sometimes. But it's good, because actually what we are doing here, well, we were beginning, you were thinking, what difference can we make?
Yes.
I don't know if we make a difference. We try to make a difference, but whatever we do, people look at what we are doing, and that's good. I mean, it keeps us on edge, and it's a good incentive to try to do as much as we can. Yeah.
Do you find that since you've been here, France has become more and more engaged with Ukraine? Because as an outsider, that's what it appears to us, that France has really stepped up and is a very close friend to Ukraine.
Yeah, France is a very close friend to Ukraine, that's for sure, certainly as Canada is and many other countries. I think the commitment from French authorities, and in particular from President Macron, started from the very first day of the war in 2022, and actually was having this very intense contacts with President Zelensky. It started at that moment, at the very beginning of the full-fledged invasion war. Something changed, though, and I think that, and this is quite spectacular, and you can see that in the polls, and that is that the degree of understanding by French people that actually what is happening here in Ukraine does have a direct impact on the security of Europe and on our own security. And it takes some time for this realization to come. And there was a last poll actually made available during the YES conference, which demonstrated that actually over two-thirds of French people support to do more for Ukraine, which is, of course, extremely encouraging. So those figures are raising up, but also that actually for the first time, there is a majority of French people who support the idea in the framework of ceasefire of sending some French troops as a part of a reassurance force with other coalition of the willing countries, of course, coalition of the willing, including Canada. So for us, it's very important because it demonstrates that actually there is strong support at home with the broad idea of supporting Ukraine. So that's quite mainstream in France now.
And the coalition of the willing is clearly the critical group of countries now that are providing that assurance to Ukraine that we have your back to Ukraine, and in a very positive way. And you mentioned boots on the ground, so I think those conversations are definitely occurring more. At the YES conference, there was a lot of conversation about security guarantees. You had a delegation at the YES conference too, didn't you?
We had 3 delegations in reality. So Deputy Minister for Europe, in spite of the political situation in France, which is quite interesting because the government is, the Prime Minister is new, but the government is still a caretaker government. But nonetheless, the Deputy Minister, Mr. Benjamin Haddad, made a point into coming, and I think it was very important to demonstrate the continuity of our support and that it is beyond, politics and internal politics. We also had a delegation led by Mr. Gabriel Attal, who is a former prime minister in France, a very influential person, but who is also the chairman of a friendship group in the Assemblée Nationale and with a radar. And we had a third delegation with colleagues from working directly for the president in his cabinet office. So yes, we had 3 delegations, and I think that's important. We used to struggle a bit to have, lots of people during the YES conference, but I think that now it changed. Also because there is this realization that what's happening here is really important. So of course, the ambassador can only rejoice about that, even though, of course, that's a lot of work and complications. But it was nice and very important, I think.
But I know I was on there. I listened to their panels, and they speak. There is no question that they're supportive of Ukraine. It's very clear in how they speak, and they see the coalition of the willing as an important partner. They have great influence on other countries, and it's garnering support in terms of funding, in terms of military weaponry, and so on. And in fact, I've talked to other people who've said that France has actually been so far ahead on some of this that they've even sent things like prototypes of various equipment that they themselves have not yet had a chance to really test. But the advantage is that they're testing it in real war situations. And then, I don't know if this was true or not, but someone said then they could put the label, tested in Ukraine, which makes it very important. Sad, but I mean, but on the other hand, it's true. We're all seeing the defense industry evolving very quickly, and it makes sense for all of us, for our own security, to be part of that.
It does. It's quite important what is happening on the ground here. The war, which is led by Russia, unfortunately, against Ukraine, is very different from the previous wars we have been seeing, including in the Balkans. And it is something of a different nature because of this blatant aggression, but also and because it's Russia, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, who is actually spearheading this, but also in the way military tactics is involved. Is the war of drones is the first in our history. And definitely there are sectors in which we can collectively try to help Ukrainians because we have advantage, we have hedge, we have knowledge. But in some other places or other themes, actually, Ukrainians are far in advance compared to us. Intercepted drones, for example, which is bright new. It's here in Ukraine. I think it's nowhere else in the world. And actually, so yes, Ukraine is... unfortunately, and because of a war, is the battlefield test for every new equipment, military equipment, and fair enough. And this also brings some added value for Ukraine in reality. So we are all for it,
at the YES conference, we also had some Canadians there. So we
Absolutely.
had Chrystia Freeland there. We also had, so for those who don't know, she's the former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. Up until yesterday, was also Minister of Transport in this
big change yesterday, right?
So,
I saw that in the news.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she resigned from the cabinet and was actually... named as Special Envoy for Reconstruction for Canada here.
Well, it's great for this position. I saw her at the YES conference, and she was so dedicated, so focused, so sharp, so on the ball. But I think it will be great for both Canada and Ukraine, actually. Yeah.
We are very pleased because I think that we have recognized that we have sort of really two big priority areas for Canada right now: prosperity. And integrity in terms of our own territorial security and sovereignty. So I think Ukraine for us is also a very important partner. But it's just a lot of work to to start being prepared for the reconstruction efforts, which I think is going to be, from what I understand, just as large as it was after World War II. Now, France, you actually are ahead of us in a lot of this. So I'm happy that we are getting ready. But I understand France has already started thinking in terms of reconstruction here as well.
Well, there is a lot of thinking about reconstruction. We have a special envoy from the French president in charge of reconstruction. So, of course, there are lots of discussions. One thing is clear that the needs will be huge. There is a World Bank report stating that actually something like $578 or something billions are needed, which is such a huge sum, which is barely understandable or thinkable. And then there is all this big debate on how to finance that. How can we use the Russian assets to finance that if Russia would not pay some reparations after the war, and so on and so forth. So there is this discussion. But at the same time, I think what is really important is to be very active. Well, we always say that reconstruction starts now, and in reality, that's the case. So Ukrainian makes a point, and I think it is very strong and powerful to rebuild. In Kharkiv, for example, you don't see so many buildings destroyed because they are rebuilding it. And of course, they are right. And same thing in Lviv or in Kyiv, of course. So reconstruction starts now. In reality, now it's at the same time reconstruction and resilience. But I think it's very important to provide this because actually resilience of a country is not only military, it's also the strength and the strength of will of people who are living a nearly normal life or at the rear, not inside the military, and we have to support them too. So this is what we are actually trying to do. We are lucky to have a first business community, foreign business community, as far as the number of employees are concerned, so a little less than 30,000 employees. So, and we have been there for 20 years or so. So it's important. And all these French companies stayed. So we are very proud of that. And they not only do they stay, but they invest in the country. We are trying to bring some additional companies. It's very difficult because, of course, war, even though we have insurance schemes and all that, but it is complicated. Some of them actually do come. And we had a great program with Mr. Xavier Niels' investment in LiveCell, which is the third cell phone and landline operator in Ukraine. So from time to time we managed to do this, and then we try to involve more French companies. So we have a bilateral fund of 200 million euros reserved for French companies, but working with local authorities in Ukraine.
Is this, sorry, just to clarify, because I know you have a grant and a loan program. Are you referring to the grant program?
Okay, no, this is not a loan; it's a grant.
This is a grant.
Actually, 200 millions that came from French national budget to finance work from French companies that they do themselves, or that they would do with Ukrainian firms to build some or to rebuild some critical infrastructures in local places in Ukraine.
So public infrastructure,
mostly public infrastructures, but it could also be private infrastructures. We had also, for example, a project with DTEC because it's so strategic for and we do that in Bucha, of all places.
Very important,
Of course. So we are doing this. So we received an amount of projects, of interested projects, of 700 million euros. So it means that we had to choose with a Ukrainian counterparts, of course, at that point, the Minister of Economy and Julia Zviridenko, she used to have this position, the best projects, and this is being implemented right now as we speak. And we are working of a new batch of this fund to try to bring more French companies.
This is wonderful because one thing that also came through at the YES conference loud and clearly is that we can talk about security guarantees and they're all important, but let's face it, the more countries people invest in Ukraine, the more incentive it is to really protect Ukraine because you're protecting investment, you're protecting the people, and we should all do that together as a collective, which you're seeing more and more of as well. Canadian companies who are here say they are doing really well. And I know that we need to deal with all kinds of war risk, but really that it is in reality, it very rarely actualizes, right? We hear in the news the ones that do, but they're doing well. And then they're doing so well that they're reinvesting their investments and they're further developing that economy with Ukrainians, as you said. But it's getting the new people here. And I'm hoping that our special envoy will help with that because it sounds like it worked in France.
It did, and I'm very happy of that, and of course we have to continue. And there is another dimension to that, if I may. It works for French companies, but also for Canadian companies, actually. The more foreign Western companies there are here, the easier it is for our Ukrainian friends to understand the road to the EU accession. Because at the end of the day, the norms, the standards of tomorrow will be EU norms and standards. So the more you work with people who are actually implementing the standards for themselves, the easier it will be to switch on. And I think it's really important. And of course, EU firms play a key role in this. But in reality, every Western company brings also this kind of mindset. And I think it's an extra added value. So, and what strikes me, when you speak about EU accession is you speak with elites and everybody is so in favor and so pro-European. But what is really striking is when you speak to common people, because they are even more pro-European. And this is a great strength because maybe they don't know in detail how the EU works. And mind you, sometimes it can be a little tricky and complicated even for us. But they are very sincere in their aspiration to become a Western European country, normal country, liberal in the economic sense of the term, and if possible, one day included into NATO too. So this is the dream, and I think that this is why, in reality, this is why Ukraine is fighting, right? So we have to support that too.
Do you have a lot of Ukrainians who've moved to France? since the full-scale invasion?
Not so many compared to Germany, Poland, or even Spain. We used to have something like 115,000 in France. I understand that now there are something like 75,000 remaining. So compared to our size and to the size of Ukraine, actually it's pretty small. But still, it's an important community. And of course, we are trying to support them for them to be, as well as possible in our country.
I asked that because Canada was at least 250,000, and additional since the full-scale invasion. And what we're finding is that they're integrating into Canada very easily, very quickly. We had all kinds of programs thinking that we needed to support, but not as needed as we thought. Many of them are opening up their own business, so that's the kind of person we're attracting. And I imagine that a lot of the Ukrainians are now looking at how do they trade with Ukraine, how do they build joint ventures. So these are Ukrainians that are mobile. They are not looking to move to a place and stay put. I believe, and I believe that the analysis that Ukraine has done, that a lot of these Ukrainians will, in fact, be dual citizens moving back and forth, and both of our economies will benefit from that kind of movement. So, and this is coming up in many of my discussions. It was the same with Poland and so on. So the world is changing in terms of people movement, in terms of investment. And just like in Canada, our economy, Ukraine has now moved to an economy that relies relies entirely on small, medium enterprises, just like Canada. While Ukraine used to be a large industry dependent type of country. So yes, I find that it's changing in terms of the industry, in terms of the sectors of support.
Well, actually, the structure of Ukrainian economy will be very different after the war. Obviously, Ukraine will remain a very mighty agricultural superpower, as France agrees.
We need that, though, right?
And of course,
the world needs that.
The world needs that. I know that the WFP, before the war, was paying 80% of his wheat to Ukraine. Yes. So it's a global thing, right?
Yes.
But for example, siderurgy might be, or steel might be less important as it used to be, because so many capabilities have been destroyed, part of these territories are occupied, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, before the war, you didn't have all this incredible digital, so agile, so reactive new system that the Ukrainians managed to build. Actually, there are things you can do with the DIA application in Ukraine you certainly cannot do in my country, and so that's impressive. So I think it's also an added value, and of course the sector of defense, which is, because of the reasons we mentioned earlier, which will be certainly very important in the future for this economy. So the structure of the economy is changing quick, and actually it's quite striking, because it does not happen in normal countries, right, where you don't have war. So, yeah.
So we talked about the Coalition of the Willing a little bit, but another group that our countries belong to is the G7.
Yeah.
And here on the ground, we have an ambassadorial group of that supports the reform process for Ukraine. It was established in 2015 as part of the G7 leadership at that time, very much at that time focused on economic reform, still valid today, but it has expanded, especially as you mentioned with the EU accession, and the ambassador group is still active here on the ground.
It is.
We meet often, and we meet with the Prime Minister and the Office of the President and various ministers, and we also now meet with NGOs, and it's regarded as a friend to various groups in Ukraine. And so Canada as the current chair.
Absolutely.
And we will be passing the baton, or in here, the bulava, because we actually
Exactly.
pass the bulava over to the next ambassador. And I will be passing the bulava to you. So are you ready for this responsibility?
No, but I can assure that we are working on this, so we still have a few months to get prepared. But definitely, joke apart, we are working on this. It's G7 is a unanimity group, so presidency is not going to decide for the others, right? But still, it's got a very important role to impulse dynamism and working methods and so on. What you are doing wonderfully. So we will try to continue this tradition. It's of course not always easy, but I think it's very important to have this kind of group here in Ukraine, open to meeting plenty of different people, of course, the government, but also civil society, business, whatever, to discuss reforms and to try to, inform our authorities about what's going on here, because actually that's the first duty of ambassadors, but also to participate into the conversation about what a good reform actually is. Ukraine is a vibrant democracy, and this is so interesting and so good for all of us. So it means that these questions, time and again, are heavily and intensely discussed, which is fine. I mean, actually, that's the very definition of what a vibrant democracy is. But I think it's important to send the signal that yes, we can afford that, and we can afford the reform movement. It is impressive to see that Ukraine manages at the same time to lead the war and to make reforms. Actually, historically, it's not a given. It's rather the opposite. But Ukraine is doing this for the reason we mentioned earlier, because of the objective of a war and the objective of the reforms are in fact the same, to have a stable, independent, modern, liberal, Western member of the EU country. And this is, I think, what Ukrainians want, and we have to support them in this, and to support the government, of course,
Yeah, so it's nice that we're considered an influential group, because it gives us access to interesting people. So I think we learn a lot, and again, I'm finding that as a group, we're also able to deliver messages and support in a very effective way. So looking forward to passing that bulava over to you. France, maybe just to switch gears a little bit and to learn a little bit more about some of your other mandate areas. I'm impressed with how France is still very active culturally here. So despite the very fact that there's a war, you're still doing cultural diplomacy, which is very impressive. Francophonie is an area that we both belong to, but do you find that you're questioned on that, or do you think Ukrainians welcome the fact that you're putting so much emphasis on cultural diplomacy?
Well, we are doing this additionally to the rest, of course, but I think there is a great support from the Ukrainian public and Ukrainian authorities to that, be it cultural diplomacy in its narrow meaning, but also education. Yes. Actually, the French International School, Anne of Kyiv, was the first international school to reopen in September 2022.
I did not know
September 2020. Wow. So we divided by 10 the number of children, of course, because, that was, right at the beginning of the war. But still, we made a point, and Paris supported, including financially, of course, very much so that we could reopen. Because whatever happens, children need education, and we are also here that participates of the resilience of a country, right? So it was very important for us to do so, and we are proud, actually, of having done so. To some extent, it's the same thing with culture, because Ukrainian, as you know, there is a vibrant cultural scene in Ukraine, and it is important to support that too, and to have this dialogue between French culture, Canadian culture, Ukrainian culture. And actually, when you look into that, it's amazing to see how intertwined this dialogue has been over centuries. I mean, since Anne of Kyiv, back in the days of French royalty, until now. But sometimes, and this is why I think it's even more necessary, sometimes it's hidden. It's hidden because it was hidden by Russia. For example, when I was a young student, as a Frenchman, I was, of course, studying Balzac, the huge writer. And Balzac was married to a countess, a Polish countess. And this is what I learned at school. But she wrote to him from Odessa, actually in a newspaper, an unknown lady from Odessa. And she was completely Ukrainian in reality. And he married her in Ukraine. And he lived in Ukraine after marrying her for a few months. And then, unfortunately, he got sick. He went back to Paris and then he died. But in any case, my point is that this part of Ukrainian identity has been hidden by the different countries, which actually at some point did occupy or control this country or parts of this country. And this is profoundly unfair because it masks, the very, very existence of Ukraine. So something which is structurally extremely important, and this is being done in France, is that, we used to have in universities some Slavic studies, which in reality were Russian studies with a bit of something else.
Yes.
But now we need to have, of course, there are still some Russian studies, but we need to have some Ukrainian studies and some, all the other countries too, because actually this is different. Because otherwise, to some extent, you accept the Russian narrative, which is something that politically we cannot do, and which is when we are living here, we see how far it is from the truth and from current situation. I mean, lots of people, lots of Ukrainian citizens, Russian-speaking, are actually being killed by Russians in the Ukrainian army fighting for their country, which is Ukraine. And they still speak Russian. So that's not the story. The story about which is your country, not which is your language.
Yes, but speaking of Queen Anna, who is Ukrainian,
exactly.
Probably an incredibly influential diplomat for Ukraine, because I understand she even introduced Ukrainian language as something that the French aristocracy were learning because of her influence. Is that true?
I'm not so sure. What I know about her is that actually she knew how to speak and to write Latin, which at that time was not such, so common into the aristocracy, because monks was actually doing that. But so she was supposed to be very knowledgeable on this, and to great support and advice for both her husband, but also her son, because she was also the mother of a French king. But it is interesting because it actually demonstrates, same thing with music actually, it actually demonstrates how there is such a thing as European culture, European music, European art, and that Ukraine was a completely included part of this history, and not something different. So, so we have those common roots, and sometimes we have to rediscover them.
I understand you are a historian.
Oh, yeah.
Where you studied history.
Yes, that's it, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What did you study?
Yesterday.
What was your favorite topic? Or what is your passion in history?
Well, to tell you the truth, my father was he was a real historian, I'm not, but he was a professional historian specialized in Middle Age.
Okay.
So this is, so when I was a young boy, I listened to my father speak for ages about this, and it was, of course, fascinating in reality. But, history is so important for us, and actually it can be so misleading if you try to use that into political narrative. So I think it's very important to be precise on this, and for us diplomats to see things as they are. And today Ukraine is here, and it's united, it's fighting, and actually there is a long history behind that, and we should abide by this and continue this.
Longue durée.
Exactly. Fernand Braudel, so you see.
Oui, moi aussi. Moi aussi, j'ai étudié l'histoire, as I also studied history, so it is very important. And I'm going to just end with food, because if we're talking about diplomacy, food is something that I think is actually very important as well. I know ambassadors get teased a little bit about this, but I think some of the most important meetings, not just among ambassadors, but about various groups, happens over food.
Well, food is very important for ambassadors and meals, because actually that's the only moment when can you be sure that you can nail someone for 1 hour 30 minutes without him having a chance to leave.
Especially if you do it. So, we have 5-course meal today. Yes.
So yes, so yes, it's part of a trade, and actually one of the things that you learn as a young diplomat, as you know, is to be able to eat very quickly when you
or what fork to use.
Yeah, exactly. While you make report and actually speak.
Yes.
So yes, this is interesting. Actually, it is fascinating because Ukrainians, there is this wonderful Ukrainian cuisine, but also wonderful Ukrainian wines, actually. And for we French, it's it's a sister country in this, and it's important to develop that too. But yes, it is something that we share. It's part of the European culture, right?
Well, and
Western culture.
French are known or credited for the fact that diplomacy comes from the French. Do you think that's true?
No, I don't think so. I think that diplomacy comes from the Greek cities and then the Italian cities. But there is a story which is true, and that is at the Vienna Congress after the Napoleonic Wars, Talleyrand was representing French king, and actually he brought with him a guy who was called Carême, who was the most famous cook in his time. And people say that Carême was not for nothing in the fact that France entered as a loser country into this negotiation and went out as one of the winners, surprisingly.
Right.
So he was writing to the king, "Please, sire, send me less instructions and more things for my cook."
Yes.
Casserole and so on. Yeah.
So why is French considered the diplomatic language, or was?
It was historically, because in the 18th century and in the 19th century, every court in Europe was actually speaking French. During the Russian Revolution, actually, the Russian aristocracy was speaking French, because at that time everybody was speaking French.
Yes.
Now, of course, English is the dominant language in diplomacy, as it is for the rest. There are a few remaining places where French still play an important role. And of course, we are legitimately attached to that, including inside the European Union, the Court of Justice of the European Union, and many other places. But okay, French used to be the diplomatic language par excellence. Now the truth is that it's rather English. C'est la vie.
Okay. Anything you would like to add before we...
Yeah, I think, time flies so quickly here. Sometimes for the best, sometimes it's. I remember when we arrived in August 23. Actually, the story about at that time was the Ukrainian counteroffensive, you remember? So there was exciting times. Now, of course, we're in a very different phase. But what strikes me is that whatever the phase, whatever the news, the resilience and the bravery of the Ukrainian people, their will to be free, independent, and European. And I think that this is one striking thing, one constant thing, and this is why we are here. So when we get up as diplomats in the morning, there is not a single day when you ask yourself, why on earth I am here? We know why we are here, because there is such an important task to do in supporting these people. And I'm very happy and proud that we participate together into this. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you very much for being here today. I agree with you, and we all feel like we're at the right time and a very important moment, supporting a people that are fighting for their existence. It's easy to support them because they're passionate, and it's not just one segment or one region of Ukraine. It's all of them, whether they speak Ukrainian at home, whether they speak Russian at home. They are fighting for their country, they're fighting for their culture and identity, and it feels good to be there with them and easy to support them because they believe so deeply what they're doing. And we are very lucky to be here, and we have a very good community here as well. I feel very fortunate to be with such great colleagues including yourself, Gaël.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining me. I'm here today with Gaël Veyssière, who is the ambassador of France. I'm Natalka Cmoc. You've been listening to Off the Record. Thank you very much for joining us.